As we talked about last week, for those of us who have been on our journey to awakening, we know that once we have been working diligently on our own awakening, right? Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Once we have fulfilled all the basic needs and the relationship needs and our self-expression needs, and we start having peak experiences, we realize that it is time to contribute our consciousness, our vibrational rate, our resonance, our expectation for good. It is time to take that to the collective, the consciousness of humanity, to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence. And you may or may not know that that is the purpose statement for our international denomination, Centers for Spiritual Living, to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence. Yeah, so today we're going to begin with the global vision, and this is the form, maybe not quite in specific, but this is how we want to envision or imagine what does it look like when humanity is actually awakened. Right? We ask ourselves, what does our life look like when we're awakened to our spiritual truth? We're a little more peaceful, we're a little less afraid, we're a lot more willing to claim our good, we practice telling the truth, right? There are ways in which we can think about what our life feels like as we are awakening. And the more that we say yes to our awakening, the more we move forward. Perhaps the forms of our life change. We find ourselves doing or being different. But it starts by us envisioning that that matters and that that will make a difference. And so Centers for Spiritual Living and CSLDallas, we do the same. And if you haven't seen it or you don't remember, the Global Vision is actually hanging in our fellowship hall in Pankey Hall, right next to the What We Believe statement from our founder, Ernest Holmes. A global vision, we see a world that works for everyone, where all life is honored as expressions of the divine, where people live according to spiritual truth, where humanity awakens to its spiritual magnificence, where humanity recovers personal creative power, where we live in one global family, where kinship with all life prospers, where unity and connection are emphasized, where forgiveness is the norm, where spiritual guidance is valued, where we are called to conscious social action, where people have enough food, home, and a sense of belonging, where there's peace, harmony, and justice for all, where communities are meaningfully involved in service to the world, where there is a renewed emphasis on beauty, nature, creativity, art, and aesthetics. A global vision. A vision that says life works for everybody. And it does, that includes us. Our lives also still work. But a larger vision that says life works for everybody. You'll notice that it doesn't say according to a particular set of rules or a particular set of ideas or with some particular forms that are required. It's not a utopian experience, recognizing that we're all growing and transforming and awakening to what we are called to do. And each one of these lines is an opportunity for us to think about, as we awaken in our own lives, which of these are we then called to contribute to? Which of these speak to us? Right? We're all going to, not all of us are going to answer a call to every particular thing. We talked about that last week as we answer the call to from humanity's soul. that is calling our soul to awaken to that larger gift that we have, which is raising the consciousness as a whole, which is to live into this vision to the best of our ability. And quite frankly, as we know, it works better to speak a vision than it is to speak about how awful it is, right? When we talk about how it ain't awful, that doesn't mean we don't look a fact in the face. We know this. We look a fact in the face, and we deny its spiritual validity. We don't pretend the facts aren't true. We don't pretend that's not people's experiences. We don't say, oh, no, your leg isn't broken and you don't have pain. What we say is that there's nothing in spirit's wholeness that would stand in the way of the perfect healing of that. And so we do the same when we look at the larger issues that we are facing, whether it's locally, nationally, or globally. We look the fact in the face and we deny the spiritual validity, that there is anything in life itself, that God in any way would inflict this upon people, that spirit has some idea about this, that it is required. We recognize that just like in our own lives, choices are made, and those choices, well, they kind of reflect back to us, don't they? Some choices reflect back lovely and wonderful things, and other choices don't. And this is how we, as individualized expressions of the infinite, are educated. Our choices are educated because we are free, as we talked about last week. We are free to make whatever choice we choose. But we are called to participate in the awakening of humanity. Our choices of thought, word, deed, our choices of intention, our choices of raising our vibrational rate and how we respond to things, all of those are the choices that we make and that we contribute to the awakening of humanity. Sometimes it's a little hard to find the reflection of choices that feel as though it's moving us forward, but they are all there. They're all there. So let me read you some good news. Good news, climate victory. Swiss citizens vote in favor of a new law to reach net zero emissions by 2050. They join numbers of countries that have done this. Some of them have even put it in their constitution. There's a story here about ex-poachers who are restoring the Indonesian coral reefs that they themselves destroyed, recognizing that it has to be rebuilt for life to sustain itself. They are now rehabilitating the very coral reefs that their industry destroyed. Another piece of good news, wind and solar overtake fossil fuels in the EU as energy transition hits overdrive. There's now more renewable energy, specifically wind and solar, being used in the European Union countries. And it's now over the amount that is being created by fossil fuel. Fabulously good news for the climate. Deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon fell by 68% in April. 68% in April. Pretty amazing, right? Greenhouse and other emissions in the European Union fell by 4% in the last 3 months of 2022. It is the first identifiable drop in greenhouse emissions in Europe. Identifiable drop. Austria has helped pay for more than 500,000 repairs in a bid to tackle e-waste. They're now giving people money to fix their computers and their calculators and all their phones rather than throwing them in the landfill. I know, right? Woo, amazing. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided that it will not vote on local climate cases in a critical victory. This means that cities and states can sue massive fossil fuel polluters, and the Supreme Court is going to let them. Right? So you know, sometimes it looks a little bleak out there. There is massive good news. What is really encouraging is that over 100 countries now have a full or partial ban on single-use plastic. Over 100 countries. I know, right? Let's see. There's a corporation in France, Aramet, which is developing techniques to recycle the critical metals used in electric cars, aiming to make the batteries recyclable so that they too don't have a negative impact on our environment. You can applaud all that, right? That's a lot of good news. That's a lot of, and this is, I just looked at countless newsletters of good news and places and websites that talk about good news, and it's all over the world. And a lot of the good news is, in fact, in response to the climate crisis. There's no question about it. But as you and I both know, it's a little bit of a mixed bag when we do look at the news. It's some of it is a little scary, some of it is a little challenging, some of it's very disappointing. And although globally it's more positive than not. If you look at all of the trajectories of all of the continents, almost all of them are going up, whether you are calculating freedom, whether you're calculating prosperity, whether you're calculating especially women's rights globally have skyrocketed extraordinarily in ways that are really surprising. Of course, there are always outliers, and there are certainly places that has gone the other direction. But the trajectory, every one of them, is upward. Yeah, right? 84 countries have no war or civil unrest. 72 do, but 84 don't, right? So the question is always, how do we keep the momentum going? How do we move in concert with that which is moving us forward into a healthier, happier, more prosperous, more free life in which all people can have a life that works? Notice that none of these are about a particular political system or a particular political party or a particular political way in which a state or a nation should be organized, right? This is the general trajectory of humanity seeking to have lives that work. Don't we all want that? Food, shelter. We want to be able to raise our kids. We want a planet that will provide us with food that we can also love and enjoy and be a part of, right? Yeah. So this is where we, as people who are spiritually grounded, who are seeking to now move our awakening to a larger engagement, where we are seeking to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, right? This is where we get to the treat and move your feet part. We say it for ourselves, treat and move your feet. So we do our treatment, and then we send out the resumes, right? And we actually expect that all to work out. We treat, and then we put our house on the market, and no matter what, we expect it to work out. and TSRW. Sure enough, it does. Little bobbles here and there, whatever the path is, but we expect, and we do the work along the way, right? And our work is in two places. One is our consciousness raising. We raise our consciousness to our expectation of good. We raise our consciousness to our vision of of what that good is, right? And then we become aware of the things that we ourselves need to do. We need to be able to act and move in our own lives with confidence, with trust, with a expectation for good, right? So we raise our consciousness, and then we are aware of what it is that we need to do. The same thing is true when we are seeking to raise the consciousness of humanity, to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence so that we are creating a world that works for all of us. We raise the consciousness, the contribution that we have to the consciousness of the whole, and we become aware of those things that we are called to do. And we can then do that with confidence, with an expectation for good, and with a willingness to follow the twists and turns and not become distracted or fall into despair or apathy. Right? So we do our collective work when we do our meditation and treatment together. And we do our awareness work. It's one of the reasons why we're having the democracy and advocacy training next Sunday. Practitioner Sherry Wood, Reverend Patty Generous, and myself are going to talk about how do you do that kind of work from a place of high consciousness, which is not tearing people down on Facebook. Nor is it even actually ranting and raving on Facebook, because that has no influence on public policy whatsoever, right? Advocacy is understanding where our work is effective. It's exactly what we do in our own lives, right? Going and sitting with your friend and going, me, is about your relationship is not going to make a difference. Not going to help, right? So we raise our consciousness, and we become aware of how can we move our feet that is aligned with that consciousness, that is bringing that consciousness forward. And so these are the things that we can work with. Part of the challenge here is, hang on, oh, it's so interesting. Okay, let me tell you that as I was researching for this, that is so interesting. As I was researching for this talk, there were a couple things that I looked at specifically, and the news was not so great. I noticed that I got sick to my stomach. So I'm going to tell you a few of the pieces, but they've mysteriously all disappeared from my notes, which I find fascinating. They're literally gone, and I know, right? This cracks me up. So surprisingly enough, all over the world, minority rights are on the increase, except for in the United States. Women's rights are on the increase pretty much everywhere around the world, except for in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Middle East, and the United States. The ongoing sense of peace and prosperity, which has been on a long trajectory upwards since World War I and World War II in the last 10 years, has gone down, specifically due to terrorism, drugs, and the challenge of certain kinds of political ways of closing down countries and starting to create border issues. The ongoing trajectory for peace is stalled right now on the planet. And so I noticed that as I was reading these things, there was even one about the economics in the U.S. today is still a mixed bag, despite the fact that month after month after month and quarter after quarter after quarter, more and more jobs continue to be added. And there's a fair amount of confusion about why this is so. And there is concern about the economic systems which have been on an upward trajectory for years. And so we're in a moment, right? Lots of good news, and it's a mixed bag. So our job, my job, which I just find, it cracks me up that these are gone, because I want to look the fact in the face, but I don't want to engage with it. Do you see? I don't want to fight with it. I don't want to get all about, isn't it awful, isn't it awful, isn't it awful? What I want to do is hold the vision. Hold the vision for how it could be. Hold the vision for what it might look like when humanity is awakened. Hold the vision for how things are unfolding. That was a whole boatload of climate stuff that is really kind of amazing. And 3 days ago, before I did this, I was up until 2 o'clock in the morning doing every bit of spiritual work I knew how to do, because my fear around the climate had gotten activated. And then I read all this good news, and I thought, oh man, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work. The other thing that I found fascinating, and this is another reason why we're doing the democracy and advocacy training, is if you look at European and global news, good news, and you look at American good news, it is astonishingly different from my point of view. Here's the thing I noticed. When I read American good news, individuals are highlighted. So there's an orchestra conductor in somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic, and he has a mental illness, and yet he became an orchestra conductor, and so he's created a whole orchestra of people who suffer from mental illness. It's an extraordinary story, right? Individuals who have saved the dolphin, or individuals who are using art to raise money so that their neighborhood can have solar. They're doing this whole art thing. It's amazing. They've raised $250,000 in GoFundMe, and they're now putting solar on homes in their neighborhood. But the news is all about individuals. This individual rescued these horses. This individual is creating this not-for-profit. This individual is cleaning the park. This individual, it's very individualized. When you look at global news, you look at European news, you look at news out of the Indian subcontinent and other places, and in Africa, in good news, there are individual stories, but the bulk of them are business, civic, legislative, and political power moving toward good. It's a very different, right? You heard what I read. Austria did this. Switzerland did that. The EU is doing this. Deforestation is decreasing in Brazil, not because of individuals, but because new public policy has been created. That public policy comes out of culture. Culture comes out of the way in which we think about the world. We have to stop thinking about the world as independent individuals. We have to recognize that we have to think about the world as interdependent beings that are all part of the one, that are all part of the one global family, that are all part of the local and the local public civil society. We're part of this society here. We're part of the society of our nation. And we're part of the humanity on the planet, right? We aren't just individuals. And that's both a blessing and a curse of our philosophy which comes right out of the American psyche. And you can see it so amazingly displayed in the way in which you can read about good news. And so when we say treat and move your feet, right, the treatment is to contribute to the collective consciousness. Yes, of course, absolutely. We all have to ask, what can I do? No question about it. We all have to ask that. What can I do? Am I using my bags? Am I recycling? How am I doing with electricity? What am I doing with fossil fuels? Right? What am I doing with racism and women's rights and all of those things? No question about it. But when we are talking about the raising of consciousness for humanity, do you see? We have to own our interdependence, and that our work in consciousness is contributing, and our moving our feet in the world is also necessary. I am going to close with this. The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and nations of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. I told myself I wouldn't cry reading this. We, the successors of a country in a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine. But that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. So we lift our gazes, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. Sorry. We seek harm to none and harmony to all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one should make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. This is the promise to Glade, the hill we climb if only we dare it. Because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It is the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, that would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy, and this effort was very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can periodically be delayed, but it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith, we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. children's children's children. This is the era of just redemption we feared in its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked how can we possibly prevail over catastrophe, now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burden. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy, and we change our children's birthright. So we leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation and in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When the day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If we are only brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. So it is.